Hey there ghouls and creeps, I'm Brit, and welcome to my channel where we do spooky, DIY, home, and lifestyle content all year long. One Halloween decor item that I've seen a lot of folks buying for this season is the Target Dollar Spot Ghost Pillow. So much so that every time I'm on social media browsing, I see at least one reel or other short form video content featuring this coveted item, which as a DIYer got me thinking how simple a ghost pillow would be to make, and how fun it would be to do a video for this specific project. I've also been scoping out this super cute pumpkin pillow that Target also sells, which we'll be creating as well using a simple method that I saw on TikTok where a sack is made from a rectangle which then becomes a pumpkin. If you're confused by this, that's totally understandable. We'll get more into detail later in the video. But for now, let's get started drafting our pattern for this ghost pillow. When drafting a pattern for something like a throw pillow, I'll resort to the old hold up the tape measure to determine what size I want to make it. Because my pattern was going to be bigger than one sheet of printer paper, I taped two pieces together, allowing me to sketch one half of my pattern with the intent of cutting my pattern on the fabric's fold. If my pattern was asymmetrical, I would have needed to tape 4 pieces together to be able to draft the whole pattern. I had seen online in a couple different places that the original ghost pillow is 13.5 inches, either lengthwise, widthwise, or possibly this applied to both dimensions. Once I was happy with my ghost shape, I then added a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around with exception to the center fold edge. I also completed pattern prep by writing important information on the pattern and cutting the pattern out along the seam allowance line. In true Virgo fashion, I couldn't help myself but to modify the head shape one more time prior to cutting the material. Once again resorting to the tape measure trick, I determined that I wanted my pumpkin pillow to have a 35-inch circumference. After cutting my ghost pillow pieces, I realized that I probably should have cut this material from the back. This method would have reduced the shedding of the net by quite a bit. Cutting out the pumpkin was super simple. All I did was cut a rectangle measuring 36 by 16 inches. I also made center notches in my pumpkin panel to assist with applique placement later. Then it was time to draw my applique pieces for the pumpkins and ghost faces. The first one I started with was the pumpkin's mouth, since I figured it was going to be the most challenging. I wanted the teeth of my pumpkin to be similar to the original, so I brought up a photo to reference as I drew. I drafted a couple different eye sizes and determined that I wanted the larger of the two choices, measuring 2 inches by 2.5 inches. Using my already drawn up ghost pattern, I drew the eyes and mouth on the pattern to get an idea for placement and scale. After cutting out my applique templates, I then traced them out on the wrong side, or the paper side, of my heat and bond. By ironing the heat and bond to the felt before cutting, this required me to only need to cut the applique pieces once rather than twice. Now that the appliques are cut, we can adhere them to the pillows. I used my chalk wheel to draw a centerline lengthwise on my pumpkin panel to assist with applique placement. Be sure to peel the paper backing off the applique parts before attempting to iron them. I thought that during this video it would be fun to talk about our sewing journeys, when we started sewing, what we typically sew, and projects that really tested our skill sets. To start the conversation, my parents signed me up for sewing lessons when I was about 8, which I did for a year, followed by a period of maybe 8 years where I did very little sewing, with the exception of the occasional, very amateur-made Halloween costume. I decided to get a fashion design degree, which prompted me to sew more clothing than I ever had before, but also made me realize how much I enjoyed the intersection of aesthetics and engineering that sewing entails. I've sewn clothing, costumes, wearable art pieces, quilts, home decor, and accessories. But the one project that tested my skill sets the most was a dress I made as a submission for the World of Wearable Art competition that required me to Frankenstein commercial patterns, draw patterns to complete the look, work with materials in ways I hadn't before, and try my hand at airbrushing. In hindsight, I'm glad I pushed myself to try new things for this project, and I think that I grew a lot as a sewist, both in confidence and competency. Let me know in the comments what your sewing journey has been. I think it's super helpful to see that we are all in process, no matter where we are along our own path. Because I wanted to do a satin stitch around each applique's perimeter, I first adhered some Pellon fusible featherweight, or the 911FF interfacing, to the reverse side of the material to avoid having the material pucker. The trick to not getting weird gaps or inconsistencies in your satin stitch line, especially around curves and corners, is it's all about where you're putting the needle down when pivoting the presser foot. I try to think of it as when turning left, I bury the needle outside of the applique before pivoting, and when turning right, I bury the needle inside the applique before pivoting. With the satin stitching complete, I was then able to do the back seam of my pumpkin and then gather the top and bottom edges of my now tube with a basting stitch. As you can see, I wasn't able to get the opening to cinch all the way closed, so I came up with the idea to patch the opening with a circle patch, which I stitched in place with a clean and discreet slip stitch. With the pumpkin ready for batting, I then switched back to the ghost, sewing nearly all the way around the outside edge, leaving roughly a 4-inch opening for flipping and getting the batting inside. I then remembered that I still needed to make my stem pattern for the pumpkin, so I sketched this out and added a 1/2-inch seam allowance once I was satisfied with the shape. I cut my stem from the fabric and then with right sides together sewed around the stem to then flip it right side out. Now that the machine sewing was complete, I filled the pumpkin pillow with batting and cinched the top of the pumpkin as tight as possible. I luckily had a variety of different shades of orange cross-stitching floss on hand to choose from to execute the next step of creating the pumpkin's ribs. There was probably a better way to go about feeding the floss up through the center of the pumpkin. This process became a spooky game of blindly finding the needle in the batting while trying to avoid poking my fingers. One thing I did find out was that it worked out best to do a set or 2 ribs at a time on opposite sides of the pumpkin to reduce the number of knots, as well as passes up through the pumpkin center. I folded over the stem's bottom edge by a 1/4 inch and pinned it along the gather seam to close off the hole at the top. I then filled up the ghost with enough batting to make him a plump boy and then pinned the opening closed. A simple slip stitch was then used to finish off both pillows. Do these pillows look just like the ones that Target sells? No, but regardless, I think they turned out really cute. I love how the ghost face and overall shape turned out. I also like the pumpkin size and the face of the pumpkin as well. A couple things that I would do differently if I made these again would include just choosing a different material type for the ghost, although really cute. It does attract the cat hair, which is just a no-go around here. For the pumpkin, I would try to find a fabric that is fleece-like, but gathers better. I was finding that I had a lot of difficulty gathering it as like tightly as it needed to, hence the circular patches that I ended up including on the top and bottom to keep the inside enclosed. Let me know in the comments if you've been looking for a ghost pillow and just haven't been able to find one out in the wild, and I've been able to convince you to make one instead. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. Subscribing, liking, and commenting all let me know that the content I'm making is resonating with you. And thank you, as always, for visiting my creepy craft corner of the internet and for watching till the end. Now let's see those final shots. On a cold night.
Yeah.